Hey there, planner peeps. Welcome to the Jellyfish Journals. My name is Susie, and we're about to dive in and finish up all the reading pages for 2024. So let's go ahead and jump on in. So, my first step is always to log the books that I read in that last month. So, I'm currently listing all of the books that I read in December. I keep track of all of the books that I read in the STORYGRAPH app, and you can follow me over there at the Jellyfish Journals. The link is down below. It might not actually be a link. I think it's a link, but it is definitely my name so that you can find me if you check out that app. So I list all of my books out on this list, and this is actually my third list in these two Jellyfish journals. So this is the second journal, and the other, I'm trying to think, I think the other two lists, no, one of the lists is in the first journal, and the other two lists are in this journal. And I keep it pretty simple, just washi around the edges, and then I list it out. And then I go back in and I give all of my ratings. So whatever I rated it in the StoryGraph app is what I will mark in the journal. Then going back to the first journal where I started all of my reading journal stats, I have the book bracket for 2024. My winner for December was The Last House on Needless Street, which I absolutely loved. But ultimately, out of October, November, December, The Butterfly Garden was the winner. It also won that bracket, the bracket afterward, and went on to become my book of the year. I didn't have anything else in my A to Z challenge or my book bingo, so moving on to where in the U.S. Books took place, and I only had one to add in, and it was West Virginia. So that's where I ended up 2024. For my bookshelfie, I pulled out the markers. I used the little sticky note reference in the back of my journal, and I just pick a color randomly from the colors I've already pre-selected. And I'm just coloring in the books on my TBR shelf here that I read in December. You're going to notice some of the books are dark gray. Those are books that I either did not finish or I got rid of. I just decided I wasn't going to get to them. Then there are also a bunch of books in dark blue, which is what I'm doing right now. And the reason I'm shading all of those in this color is because all of those books have been relocated into my new reading journal for 2025. So I didn't want to just leave them sitting here empty and naked. I wanted it to look like the bookshelf was filled in. I put a little code at the top, but all of these books will get their own color love in my 2025 journal. And there it is. Moving on from there, I add any books that I've acquired recently, and this is one that I just bought at Barnes & Noble. And now I am moving on to my December page. I don't know what to call it, but all the books that I've read in December. So every month I've put in the covers of the books that I've read that month, and I've just done a little sticker floral love for each month and wrote the name of the month there. And I also mark whether the books were audio, digital, or print, which I clearly forgot to do in November. And I'm pretty sure I also forgot to do in December. But my first step is to print out all the covers of the books that I've read that month. And I just kind of use a white paint pen to white out the little jellyfish that's printed at the bottom of each page. And then I decide how I want to lay out my books. I try to mix it up a little bit so they don't look the same each month, but to kind of keep everything cohesive, every month uses washi tape, every month uses florals, and every month obviously has the name of the month on it. So for December, I decided that most of the books would be near the bottom of the page, And then I would put some of the books at the top and write December in the middle. So I am furiously gluing all of my books in there. I think I read 17 books in December, which I don't think I've mentioned in this video, but I'm a teacher. And so whenever I have a break or some time off of school, I'm able to get a little bit more reading done. But also, full disclosure, the Mistletoe Mystery, Snowflakes, and The Lover were all short stories. They were not full-on novels. So that definitely upped the number. But I'm still happy with 14, even if I take out those 3. So glued all those down. Now I'm lining them up along the top here, just so I can create that space in the middle where I'm going to write the month December. And it's always funny to me when one book has a different shaped cover. I think that's the, precision in me, but I listened to Brain on Fire at the beginning of the month and loved it. I thought it was an excellent memoir and was a little confused why it was a more square cover. And it is not because it's audiobook. You might notice even if I read a book in audiobook, I always print the print book cover so that they're all the same. So I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but generally audiobooks, whenever you look at them in an app or online, they're always kind of a square shape as opposed to a vertical rectangle. And I want things to look consistent. So I usually print them all as the vertical rectangle. It just makes it a little easier to space things out. And also, I think it's more pleasing to the eye. But every so often, there will be a book that is shaped different, no matter where I go to find it, to print it. So just writing out December here, I found this cute little font. I don't know if I would call it a font, but I just found it on Google Images. I typed in December and found this and just kind of freehanded it. And now it's on to the stickers. So just gonna decorate it up a little bit. I went with the red and white polka dot washi. It's not my favorite washi and it definitely doesn't seem very festive, but I was digging through and I did not have any true red washi. I have a lot of like coral or off red or definitely some pinks, but nothing that kind of was a true red. I could have gone with green, but it just felt more Christmassy to use the red. So cutting off some of those stickers that stick off the edge, and I think I add just a couple little more details here. And then that is going to be it for my December spread, which means this notebook is completely finished. Hooray. Is pop into my current catch-all journal, and I am going to record my reading stats for 2024 in this journal. Since both of those Jellyfish journals are completely filled up, I didn't really have a choice but to put the stats in this notebook, which again is a reason that I'm moving to a dedicated reading journal page. On this page, I decided I was going to use the same font that I'm using in my 2025 reading journal, which is just kind of a hand-drawn typewriter font. It's not perfect, but it's pretty easy to do consistently, and I've done it for quite a while in journals and things. I end up not liking where I wrote reading stats. I've got my little eraser pencil there, and I think I've mentioned it before, but the Papermate flares, they don't dry very quickly on the Archer and Olive paper. I don't recall having that problem in other journals. Usually it dries fairly fast, but I notice it is very easy to smudge. So I'm going to go ahead and fix my mistake there. I got a little scrap piece of paper. I always keep my scraps when I cut Dutch doors and things just for this reason. And I'm just taking that Papermate flare, but being a little bit more careful this time. I'm right-handed, so I'm only going to work left to right. I know that sounds a little strange, but sometimes I'll get halfway through what I'm writing and then realize I made a mistake and tried to go fix it, and I end up smudging everything with my right hand. So I'm being really careful to just finish each letter as I go and go ahead and get a better title going. I am going to say you're going to see me making a lot of corrections on this spread. Again, even though I am being more careful this time, I still have a tendency to rush things. I'm not the most patient person, and I go to erase my pencil marks a little too soon. I have it's a pencil eraser. I don't know how to explain it. It's there to the right, just off camera there. You'll see me use it in a minute. But it's an eraser in a pencil form. And I keep smudging things up, and it just ends up being a hot mess. So for my 2024 stats page, I decided I was not going to focus on everything. Pardon me, sorry. I'm only going to focus on the books that I read, the number of pages that I read, how many books I did not finish, and whether those books were digital, audio, or print. I found this card in a used bookstore, and I just loved it, especially because right in the middle is my favorite book of all time, which is The Giver. And I just thought it would be a really cool piece to put in my journal. So that's where the color inspiration for this layout came. These are all just very bright, vivid primary colors. And so I thought that would work out really well. And when I say primary, I mean like primary school colors, like your basic Crayola box of colors, not the red, yellow, blue primary colors. Here you see me going back, trying to see if that is dry yet. There's that pencil eraser I was talking about. And wiping away the pencil shavings was smudging things. So then I brought out a paintbrush to try to work on that as well. I was just having a heck of a time. So I just moved it completely out of the way so it would be out of my eyesight. Moving on, there is my 2024. And I'm going to keep marking those little sections where I will put my totals for the year. I almost said the month. My goodness. Everybody always says, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe it's January." I definitely feel like it's January again. I came down with a head cold, if you can't tell, right on the new year, and it's just kind of not been the best start to a year, but something about all that makes me feel like it's very January. So I'm now writing digital, audio, and print, so I can record those totals there. I think I put print at the bottom and digital at the top because that way the P can hang down. It's kind of silly, but sometimes it helps save space if you think those things through a little bit. And there's some space for the totals. And now I'm ready to create the labels or headers for the honorable mention and the top read of the year. So I figured I would put my top read, which was the winner of my book bracket, on here. But I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. But there was just another book that is always in my head that I really feel like you could recommend to anybody who is a bibliophile or a lover of books. So I printed out the cover of my top read as large as I could on my little Canon sticker print paper printer, and which is why it's a little shiny. And my honorable mention, which is a little smaller, not quite as honored as my top read, but still gets to be on this spread. And I wanted to make sure that all of the books on that postcard were a part of this spread. And so I left a little space there. And you'll see in a minute, I add those other books to this spread. I have not read all of the books on that postcard. I think I've maybe read a third of them. I don't have any aspirations to read them all. I think the theme behind them all was young adult books. which is not one of my favorite genres. Some of them I read when I was a young adult myself, and some of them, like Catcher in the Rye, is on there, I think. I've always been curious about. So who knows? I may go back and read some of those. I thought the washi here was just a little too thick, too close to the pages in books read, so I decided to trim that down just the tiniest bit, so that way that washi will still have a place. That is some of my favorite washi ever. I have no clue where it came from. I've had it forever. I love all the different colors. I use it as much as I can everywhere I can. And one of the last steps, some of the edges were a little rough on here. I used a micron brush pen, I think, for this part, and it's just not as crisp as it used to be, so I just outlined that there. And my last step is to, frustratingly, with a white gel pen, try to go in and white out all of those smudges that I created. They're thankfully a little hard to see on camera, but trust me when I say they are everywhere. And eventually, once I'm done with all of this gel penning and trying to cover up all of my mistakes, I eventually just left the journal on my table to dry. I think I gave it overnight. Probably didn't need that much time, but I was frustrated, so I walked away. All right, so once some of that black marker dried and I was able to erase my pencil lines without smudging the black, I came back through and added all of my stats from 2024 using the STORYGRAPH app. I read 144 books in 2024, which turned out to be 50,739 pages. There were 10 books I did not finish. And usually I get about a chapter in before I realize it's not for me, so that's not surprising. And out of those books, 22 of the books were digital, 38 of them were audio, and 84 books were print, which means they were most likely directly off of my shelves, which is pretty awesome. My top read for the year, it's a little shiny, it's from my little printer, was The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison. This is a book that's going to stay with me. Definitely lives, as they say, rent-free in my head. And for Christmas, my mom and dad got me the rest of this series, so I'm really excited and hoping to tackle that this year. And then I decided I was also going to mark an honorable mention. And my honorable mention for 2024 is Ella Minnow P. So Ella, like Cinderella, minnow like the fish, and pea like the vegetable. And this book, I'm not even kidding. I think in a weird way, this book is going to stay with me more than this one. The only reason I didn't have this one as my top read for the year, it's pretty short, it's pretty light. And I think for my top read, I like it to be something a little meatier, a little more thought-provoking, I guess. But if you haven't heard of Ella Minnow P, it is such a creative story. Basically, these people, I believe it's an island, and they have a statue dedicated to the man who came up with this sentence that uses every letter in the alphabet. I think it's the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, something like that. I always get a little off. But anyway, so they honor him every year. There's a statue with that sentence on the statue, and he passed away ages ago. But anyway, the letters start falling off of the statue out of that sentence. And so the people in charge of the town decide that they are no longer allowed to use the letters that have fallen off. So for example, if the letter F falls off of the statue, then nobody in the town, in the island, whatever, are allowed to use that letter again. And if they do, there's consequences. Well, letters keep falling off the statue, which makes it more and more difficult to communicate with each other. And so the book is written that way. The book is written as though the author was not allowed to use those same letters. And it just has a really quirky solution to the problem. I just thought it was a lot of fun to read. It's definitely a book I will reread again and again in the future. And just, I think because of that, I really wanted to make sure that I just didn't forget that this was the year I read this book in. So now that my reading stats for 2024 are done, and it is officially January, I was able to go back into my 2025 reading journal, and I was able to finish a couple of the spreads that I had to wait until the year was over before I could finish them. One of them being my 25 in 25. So now that I know which books are finished in 2024, I'm able to go forward. I filled all of this in now. I tried to make the spines look like the spines of the actual books. And as I go through 2025, I'll just color these in as I read them. So no particular order for these, but I know a big one I'm waiting for is Sunrise on the Reaping. That'll be the new book in the Hunger Games series. The Maid's Secret is another one I'm looking forward to. I need to pre-order that still. But these are just books that either have been highly recommended, I've seen a lot of good things about, or they just seemed really appealing to me. I'm reading The Bee Sting right now. I'm about halfway through that one. And so hopefully I can hit at least one more of these in January, but we'll see. The other spread I was able to complete is my bookshelfie, this one here. So as I said in my reading journal prep videos, I write all the titles on here ahead of time. So all of the books on here are currently on my TBR shelf. They are all print books that I own on my shelf. So I went through and first I put in all of those books that were on my 25 and 25 list. So those are all on here. Then I went through and I added all of the books that I'm going to do for my 2025 reading challenge, which I found on STORYGRAPH, the app. Then once those books were laid out here and once 2024 was over, I went through and in a rough order of when they were purchased, I went ahead and added all of those other books on here. And that way, my books will hopefully be read somewhat in the order they were acquired. There's no rules to this. There's a good chance if I decide to read, for example, one of the next books in the Butterfly Garden series, I got those for Christmas. Those are the absolute most recent books I've bought. None of those are on this shelf, but I don't know if I want to wait to read those. So again, they're my books. I'll read them in whatever order I want to, but I try to do it this way to avoid having a book on my shelf that's been there for years and years and has just been overlooked in light of other things. The last page I was able to update was my up next. So kind of similar to the 25 in 25, this was another one I had to wait until the end of 2024 to fill out. And so these are just 5 books that are somewhat up next. They are on my bookshelfie, so they'll get colored in once I've read them. And I just decided, so The Bee Sting's already here, I'm already in it. The Alchemist, Murder Your Employer is the book for my January challenge. The Quiet People came highly recommended from a book buddy of mine, and I've had the new couple in 5B for quite a while, so it's time to knock that one off my shelf. And with that, I am ready to jump into reading and working on my reading challenge, and just knocking off my TBR list in 2025. So I hope you guys have all had a great start to your year already. And I will see you next time. Bye.